Hello, everyone. I know it's after lunch. Everybody wants to nap, so I'm going to use my deep, soothing voice in case you want to sneak some in while we wait for the next talk. I am going to be talking today about open source. As you heard, my name is Jason, and I work at Gatsby. My official title is the head of developer relations, but my unofficial role is human duct tape. I do a little bit of everything there, and I love it. It's actually what I love to do, because open source, especially in a new company, is very chaotic, and so you get to try all sorts of things. You get to do sales, you get to do developer relations, I got to draw a picture of a guinea pig, and I'm not going to tell you why. You're just going to get surprised when I post it on Twitter. Used to work at IBM, and I'm living in Portland, Oregon. And I want to talk about why open source matters, why it's such an exciting thing. Open source adds value in so many different ways. I mean, just first, it just powers so much of the internet. If you look at WordPress, which is powering close to 30% of the internet, you've got React, which is everywhere, you've got Drupal, which is everywhere, Angular, jQuery, Bootstrap, these are open source projects that have played such a huge role in either the current or development of the web. We get so much value from that. Who here is not using open source at their job? Zero open source. That's what I thought. I mean, it's just everywhere. It's doing something for almost everyone in development now. Open source is also really good for business. If you are a business, there is a business strategy for having open source as a core part of your business. You can first use it to build your business. You can leverage the collective knowledge of thousands of developers. You also get to do some good for the bottom line things. You get to offload a lot of the maintenance and overhead to the community. People in the community are going to volunteer to solve your bugs because you're using an open source framework. If you're a company like Airbnb or Facebook, you can build a lot of goodwill for the community. And if you're a company like Facebook, you kind of need that goodwill, right? So React is such an interesting project because most of the developers that I know who work on React are kind of actively repelled by Facebook as a platform, but they love React. And it's interesting. That's the power of open source, right? It can make you use an evil megacorp software because it's just that good. It can also rehabilitate your company image. I don't know if anybody remembers what it used to be like to talk about Microsoft, but it was if you were oh yeah, I work at Microsoft, and this is 10 years ago, people go, oh, I'm so sorry for you. You tell people that you work at Microsoft, I mean, half the speakers on the stage today work at Microsoft. We're super stoked to see them. It's wow, you work at Microsoft? That's amazing. They're hiring everybody cool. And I think that's because they decided to focus on open source as a company. That's really, that's pretty transformative. And it also, if you have open source as a core focus, either using it or building it, you have the ability now to attract some of the most engaged and talented people in the ecosystem. If you work at React, you get to recruit somebody like Dan Abramov onto your team because that's what he wants to do. He wants to work on React. You get to recruit people who just love working on these really cool, fun, open problems and giving back to the community. That's good marketing. That's good recruiting. It's good all the way around. Open source is also really good for developers. If you're a developer and you work on open source, you don't have to have a job to create a body of work. You can just release projects. You can contribute to another project, and you can start to build a reputation. You can start to build that resume, build your CV, get to the point where people, it doesn't matter that you don't have an actual job history. You've got a proven track record of doing great things on the web. You can build a referral network for paid work. If you are a prolific open source contributor, your consulting pipeline can stay full, and it can stay very full. You can turn it into a sustainable source of income. We're going to hear from Henry next, who's making a full-time living building open source. And he's not the only one. That's a really powerful model. However, let's get sad for a minute. Getting started in open source can be pretty daunting. If you've been around open source for a long time, you may remember Linus Torvalds, who is kind of infamous for being super rude as a maintainer. And I'm kind of picking on Linus. He actually did apologize and said he's going to work on the way he treats people, which I laud him for that because I think it's great that he recognized that it's a problem. And it shows a good shift. You see people like Linus Torvalds, you see communities like Stack Overflow, who are classically kind of looked at as not that inclusive or friendly, making public commitments to solving that problem. And that's really good. But it doesn't change the fact that a lot of projects still aren't. And you can still feel pretty stupid if you show up in a project and people aren't nice to you. Open source projects themselves can just be really intimidating. They are sometimes thousands or tens of thousands of lines of code. You've got tons of required context, years of history, people who have been working on these projects for so long who are not, you don't have time to necessarily learn all of that. You want to make a contribution, but like, do you really have the months that it would take to gain the context to put like meaningful contributions in? You also have to use Git. And like, I love Git. I think Git is one of the most powerful tools out there, but you have to learn how to use it. And that can be a steep learning curve if you've never done it before. I sincerely hope that you put that work in, but if you're trying to get into open source and you want to like build a website and contribute to a tool, like, you shouldn't have to want to build a website and then learn a whole other system and ecosystem and a bunch of boilerplate to be able to do some HTML on the web, right? So, it's a thing that you have to do. It kind of sucks, but it's just another hurdle that you got to come over. GitHub itself can be a little confusing. I still get confused sometimes trying to figure out which branch is which when I'm opening a pull request. I don't know, it's like I open them backwards half the time. I'll open a pull request against like my own fork, and then I'm wondering why nobody noticed it. There are all sorts of things that can get weird with GitHub if you're not super familiar with it. And if you're a first timer, like, it's there's a lot going on in there. There's so much to do on GitHub, and it can be really, really intimidating. There's also just social dynamics. Like, it's awkward. You're walking up to a group of strangers and saying like, "Hi, can I like touch your stuff?" And that's that's not necessarily something that a lot of people feel comfortable doing. I saw this. Oh man, I spelled things wrong. There's this tweet that I saw that just made me smile so much, and it's such a good take on imposter syndrome, and I'll read it because I like it that much. It says, "Imposter syndrome. I am surrounded by beings of impossible cosmic intelligence. Also imposter syndrome. I, an incompetent, have tricked them all." And I love that. It makes me so happy. You've also got kind of a lack of support. If you go into an open source project and the maintainer is overwhelmed or he just doesn't have a lot of interest in a community, they can be really rude. And if you're a first timer, that can be like a permanent damage. This person is talking about they did a PR, it was their first PR, the maintainer just closed it and said wrong, and that was it. They were like, okay, well, open source is clearly not for me. That's not what we want. That's definitely not what we want at all. And really, if you look at it, like, open source is kind of a luxury. If you have time to work on open source, that's like, you have to be able to set aside time, or you have to have a job that will let you do that. And not everybody has that luxury. You may not be able to go to your job and then go home and put 4 hours in the evening or work over the weekend. You might have kids. You might have a second job. You might have a family or someone that you need to take care of. Or you might just have a hobby, like maybe you just want to like woodwork or something. You shouldn't have to do that. Like it just, it puts a little bit of a strain on people to get into open source, and sometimes we don't have that opportunity. And if our jobs don't support it, where if you're working on an open source project and you need to fix something and they won't let you prioritize making that fix upstream, well, then what do? You just wait until the maintainer finally gets around to it? And so that's a challenge. And a really big problem is that a lot of people don't see themselves represented in open source at all. When I open up GitHub, it looks like a mirror. It's a bunch of white guys looking back at me. For somebody who's not a white guy, it can be a little intimidating to go on GitHub because there are people who aren't white guys on there, but not in near the numbers as of the 20 and 30-something-year-old white guys. And all of that added up, all of those different hurdles can kind of lead to asking a question, like, is open source actually open, or is it like only open to certain people who have certain like freedoms and privileges? And that makes me sad. Like, it really bums me out to think that open source isn't actually as open as we thought. So, if we want to make open source open, we need to be really proactive in creating that community. Open source is only as open as we actively make it. We need to reach out and welcome new contributors. We can't just say we're an inclusive project. We have to go find those people and say, hey, we'd love to have you. Please come here. Please come work with us. We'd love to have you in open source. We also need to remember and empathize with beginners. This is a steep learning curve. Development is hard. I know that when I was first starting, I'm not a particularly emotional guy. I don't cry often. I got so worked up trying to learn PHP that I wept at my computer. I was so mad. I was angry crying. And I forget that because now when I look at code, it's like somebody who can just sit down at a piano and play. I can just write code and it makes sense. That's a language I speak now. But that wasn't true when I started. And I have to remember that. I have to remember that when somebody asks me a question that I'm like, oh, that's so obvious, I can never say that to them. It's not obvious to them until they've learned it. And it wasn't obvious to me until I learned it. We also need to invest in community as a primary measure of success. If you have a project, if you are calling open source something that you do, the community around your project needs to be number 1 or 2 on your list of whether or not your project is successful. If you're not actively measuring that and counting that as part of the success of your project, you're probably on a decline, or you're not going to get as far as you could have if you had focused on community. And if we don't focus on these things, we're going to lose. We're going to lose so many brilliant people who have so many good ideas and so much talent. And if we don't welcome them, if we don't bring them in, that's it. It's gone. We lose it. We lose an opportunity to add more maintainers. If you're a maintainer on an open source project, that is a tough job. People are coming in with problems. They have bugs. They need help. They have questions. They want features. If you don't have people who are willing to volunteer and do that work and help you out, how many hours in the day do you have? How long before you get completely limited by the amount of hours you can physically spend at a computer? You have to grow horizontally. You have to add maintainers. You have to add more people. And that requires community. You have to have people who are willing to do that work, who are invested in it, and who care about it. And they can't do that if you don't welcome them in. You also lose the ability to build a support network. If you're a maintainer and you're not building your community, not only do you lose the ability to get people to do the work, but you don't have anybody to empathize with you. You don't have a community. Working remotely can be really lonely, but you at least have a company most of the time. You have coworkers and people that you talk to all the time. If you're a maintainer working remotely by yourself and you have no community, you're just alone all the time. And that's not fun. And things are really sad, and that's the end of my talk. No, I'm kidding. Fortunately, we're seeing a really good movement. I have been really, really happy to see that there are welcoming communities popping up all over the web. A couple of my favorites, Saren started Code Newbies. I love this prop. It's a podcast, it's a community, it's a Twitter chat, and people are just so excited about code, and they post what they're learning and what they're excited about. They share their problems and talk through them with each other in public so that it becomes this public repository of amazing information. You can search the Code Newbies hashtag and just, it's such a joyful community. It makes me so happy. Free Code Camp is another one. Incredible amount of resources. If you're trying to learn code, you can just sit down at Free Code Camp and get a full education. You can get to the point where you're employable without spending a dime, and with this amazing community of people who are so excited about learning code. You've got 100 Days of Code, which is another project I love. You just do a little bit of code every day and post it in public, what you're working on, what you're excited about. And there's just people who follow this hashtag and they cheer each other on, and I love it. It makes me so happy. You've got company initiatives like DigitalOcean does Hacktoberfest every October. And they just, it's like a small incentive. You get a t-shirt if you open 5 pull requests, but oh my God, do I love that. And projects from all over put a Hacktoberfest label on issues that are good for first-timers, and people just devour them. We did it at Gatsby, and I think we had 150 issues get closed. It was amazing. It was double what we usually see. For Gatsby, open source is the core of our business, and our open source project is 100% powered by community. If Gatsby didn't have the community that it has, if it didn't have the people who love to use it and share and work on it, we'd be dead in the water. We never would have had the ability to grow to where we are. I wouldn't be on this stage talking to you about Gatsby today. I'd probably still be at IBM, and I'd be real sad about it. I'm kidding. I liked IBM. I just like this better. Gatsby has a stated goal. We want to be the most welcoming, most inclusive, most fun open source project on the planet. We want everybody to have a Gatsby pull request in their name on GitHub. Every single developer, we want you in there. And to do that, we've kind of defined some core values as a company, some things that we really care about and that really matter to us. And we've got a blog post, if you want to Google that, it's Gatsby's core values, you'll find it. But the one that I'm talking about today is you belong here. This is one of our core values. We deeply believe that the community is going to make or break us as a company. And when we say community, we mean you. And any one of you who just thought like, no, he doesn't actually mean me. No, I mean you. We actually want literally every single person to come in and join us. And so we've put so much work into making Gatsby welcoming. And most of this is something that if you're working on open source or working in open source, I would love to see more of this get pulled into every project. And I am happy to help. Please reach out to me. Because you don't have to just talk to me about Gatsby. I just like open source in general, and Gatsby just likes open source in general. So use us. We have the ability to support open source. We would love to help you get involved. So we've done a handful of things to really focus on this. We've put in a code of conduct, which we think is really important. We actively enforce this. We do, very rarely do we ever have to do anything, but if somebody crosses the line, we just send them a message, and if they have done something terrible, we block them and kick them out, but I think we've had to do that once in years of having this project open. We've committed to accessibility. We are trying very hard to meet the minimum standards of the WCAG's accessibility requirements. It's a little bit harder because we have like a bunch of community plugins that are difficult to audit, but we're doing our best, and we're working on that. We just hired Marcy Sutton to be the head of learning and also an accessibility advocate. She's doing fantastic work in that space and helping call us out on the stuff that we probably should be doing better. And she's already made some great improvements along those lines. We have put together extensive documentation. Documentation is something that we consider a kind of a first-class property. We call it a product. It's not a thing that supports the product, it is a product. And we hired Marcy to own that. That is her product. We also have a whole section of our docs, a top-level navigation item, specifically about contributing. And there are a lot of different things in here. We've got, why you should contribute. We've got things about, how you can get involved, different ways to participate, whether that is actually writing code, or if you want to do a grammar fix on our docs, you want to talk at a local meetup about Gatsby, you want to run a workshop. We have an open source workshop. If you just want to give a Gatsby workshop, go download those materials, you can give it tomorrow. You don't even have to write it. We just want you to do anything you can to get involved. We also do a lot of things. Has anybody opened an issue on an open source repo? Can I see a show of hands? Keep it up if your issue got auto-closed by a robot. I see a few hands. Keep it up if that made you feel good. I see one hand back there. So one of the things that we've worked on is, Gatsby gets hundreds of issues, and not all of them are issues that we're going to have a chance to close. And not all of them are things that we have a chance to really work on, and sometimes we just don't know what somebody's asked for. And if we ask for more information and it sits, we do want to use a bot to close those issues. But a lot of times those bots are just going to say something like, issue auto-closed due to inactivity, that's it. That doesn't feel good. It doesn't give next steps. It doesn't recognize the fact that somebody took 20 minutes out of their day to contribute to your project by saying, hey, I'm having an issue, or I noticed a bug, or whatever it is. Even if it feels like they're creating work for you by opening an issue, they're giving back, they're participating, because the worst thing would be if nobody cared about your project and they weren't opening issues and you never found out about that bug. You didn't get a chance to make the project better. But if you don't have a chance to fix it, we just, we wanted to make the bot friendlier, so we taught the bot to be nice. And by that I mean we wrote some copy, but we first, we don't just auto-close. We give you a warning. We say, hey, it's a little quiet in here. We haven't heard anything from you in a while. Is this still an issue for you? Are you still working on this? And if not, we're going to close this in 10 days. And after 10 days passes, if nobody says anything, then we post this message. And this message is meant to explain what's going on, to try to show some appreciation that you're part of the community, and to give you a next step. If we closed your issue and you weren't satisfied, if if it's something that you actually did need help with and you just didn't see it within the 10-day period, we want you to open it again. We're not saying like, go away and never come back. We want you to be here. We just don't have time to do everything. And so we want to make sure that we don't have thousands of open issues that aren't moving. Stale issues they just add to the overload in a project. And so you want to find a way to control that that's not alienating people. We also believe in just implicitly trusting the community. So when you open a pull request, as soon as that pull request gets merged, our robot is going to invite you to the Gatsby organization, and you're going to get invited to become a maintainer. You get the ability to label issues, you get the ability to merge certain types of issues. We do use code owners to make sure that like core parts of the code don't accidentally get broken, and we require certain teams, which aren't all Gatsby employees, by the way. They're like community members that are on those core teams that can merge those issues. But we want people to be able to feel ownership over Gatsby, and we don't want to be gatekeepers. If you want to be part of an open source community, if you want to manage issues and make that something that you're doing, we want you to be here, and we don't want to tell you that, well, you have to prove yourself to us. Like, no, we're gonna trust you until you give us a reason not to. And so far, nobody has given us a reason not to. We have a lot of contributors. And the second part of this is that we also give people free swag as a thank you for contributing. And we do this we just associate your GitHub email address with a coupon code in Shopify. And then you can go to our Shopify store, built in Gatsby, and you can log in with your GitHub account, and we'll see that you have contributions, and then we will give you a coupon code to download some free swag. And we do this because, we don't want to introduce cash into the equation. We don't want to turn this into like an odd kind of mercenary situation where you feel like we're valuing your time at a certain dollar amount, and that shouldn't be how open source works, and it can't function that way. It won't scale. But we definitely want to acknowledge you contributed. Like, you put time in. You took time out of your day to do something, whether it's a grammar fix or a core feature or something in between. You were willing to volunteer your time to make the community better, to contribute to this project. And we don't want that to go unnoticed. So, it's a t-shirt. It's a $10 t-shirt or a hat or some socks. We just got dresses, which I'm super excited about. Stole that idea from Tracy Lee. We are like really happy to just give something and to say thank you and to make it easy for people to get into the Gatsby community. We do active mentorship. We open up a limited number of 1-hour pair programming sessions. So anybody who wants to get involved in open source can sign up for one of these pair programming sessions, and somebody from the Gatsby team will jump on with you and we'll just kind of work with you on something. The only thing that we're not going to work on you with is a commercial project. So if you're like, I want you to solve this problem for work, we're not going to do that. But if you want to get started in open source, you want to do your first pull request, you want to get involved in Gatsby core dev, we will jump on a call and we'll walk you through it. We'll screen share and just help you get started. And by doing this, we've been able to build an incredibly active community. We have around 500 pull requests and issues a month in Gatsby right now, which our core maintainers are, I don't know how they do it, but they stay on top of that. They're some of the most welcoming and amazing people because they can be nice and still close this kind of volume of issues. And I love it because we regularly see people saying wow, I just merged my first pull request to Gatsby and I can't believe how welcoming that community is. And to me, that's as good as getting my paycheck, because I've seen so many people try to get involved in open source, and I'll talk to them about it and they go, oh yeah, it was so hard, nobody responded to me, or I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, I didn't know where to start, I got stuck, somebody told me I was wrong, and I just stalled out. And so if we can get you through that first contribution, if we can get you excited and give you that first win, so that you hopefully do a second and a third and a 100th open source contribution, to me, that is the best possible outcome. And you know, like I said, Gatsby holds that as a core value. And so it matters a lot to me, but also like I get to put this as one of my like core deliverables, which is why I like this job so much and why I'm so excited about the ability to just really double down on open source. Since we started doing this, we've been able to add about 1,800 contributors to the Gatsby repo. We've got over 1,000 people in our maintainers org who are all part of a, you know, you get like a private message board and all those good things so that you can get involved. We are just absolutely in love with that because people who maybe would have like contributed once, when they get invited, we'll see them like labeling issues for us. We'll see them adding like a comment or a code review on a PR. And every single one of those is such a cool thing because we get another perspective, we get another piece of value. And I would just so strongly consider, if you're doing anything in open source, like look at this idea. Like, how can you get the community more involved? How can you make this part of what you do so that you get to spread the love around and build that community that's engaged and active? It's gonna pay you back so many times over. And not just in like feeling good, but it does feel really good. It's gonna pay you back in actual time saved. I mean, every time somebody goes in and labels an issue for us, that's 2-3 minutes that we're just kind of taking off of our plate. And whenever somebody goes in and does a pull request review, that's like 20-30 minutes. When somebody opens an actual like PR with a core change, that could be hours. We have people who have dedicated 20, 30, 40 hours to building these projects because they get excited and they feel like somebody cares that they're doing that work. And you know, you can leverage that in any open source community. You just have to be willing to put the work in to welcome people and treat them really well, to show them that they're appreciated and that you care. We have kind of set a goal. We want to live the example of what it is to be a great open source community. We want Gatsby to be the gold standard. And we're setting that up as, you know, from my perspective, the best possible outcome is that when other people are starting open source projects, we want them to steal all of our ideas. We want to become the blueprint. And that's why we open source all this stuff. If you want to set up a swag store, do it. It's open source. You can clone it and start it tomorrow. If you want to do our robot, that's open source. You can clone Gatsbot and put it in your project tomorrow. And we would love to have you join us as part of as the open source community. I'm also very confused because I have the wrong slides open here. I had another slide that was like a breakdown of all this. But ultimately, to just recap, I would really love to see the entire open source community embrace this idea of community first. Community is a primary metric. And the way that you do that is you have to be willing to do the work. You have to actively welcome people into the community. You have to actively include them. You can't just say it once and expect that people will show up. You have to seek them out and say hello and say, please come join us. If you want to have a great community, you have to lead by example. You can't hope that people will follow a code of conduct. You have to follow that code of conduct. You have to be the standard. You lead from the front in open source, or in any community. You have to lead from the front. And just, remember, no matter who you are, no matter what stage of your career you're in, no matter what you feel about your own skill level or your ability to contribute, you do belong in open source. You do have something to offer, and there are people out there who would get a lot of value from the things that you have to contribute. And thank you very much.